Chris Bowen, welcome.
Great to be with you, Sarah.
High electricity prices and the impact that those prices are having on inflation is really the Achilles heel of this government. When can you promise relief for households and businesses?
Well, prices are much higher than I would like. They're too high. I'm pleased that we've seen a substantial reduction in wholesale prices, around a third just in the last quarter. So wholesale prices really tumbling. Now, what I want to see, obviously, is as much of that as possible flow through to retail prices as soon as possible.
But can you give any guarantee that that drop in the wholesale price of electricity will be passed on to consumers in the new year?
Well, I think the key for government is to ensure that our regulatory settings are fit for purpose to make sure that as much of that is flow through as possible. Now, wholesale prices are only about a third of bills, so we've got work to do to make sure that that flows through as well as possible. But it's a third of bills where the government policies have the biggest impact. And it's no coincidence, Sarah, that as we've seen record renewables, October being the first month in Australian history that we've got half of our electricity from renewables, and that's coinciding with a tumbling of wholesale prices. That's no coincidence because renewables are the cheapest form of energy. But of course, I understand that as we speak, Australians sitting around the dinner table haven't yet seen that reflected in their bills.
Now, of course, you have a history with making promises about prices that they were going to come down. They didn't come down. Is it now just too politically risky for you to make promises about power bills coming down?
I think it's fair to say, Sarah, that we released modelling in 2021 before the invasion of Ukraine. It's fair to say that we acknowledge that there are some circumstances out of our control.
But does that mean that you've learned a painful lesson from that promise, not to make promises like that?
Well, I'm just making the point, Sarah, that as a government, we're very, very careful. We can point to different people like the Treasury and the Australian Energy Market Commission who both pointed to prices coming down, but they are economic indicators and modelling.
It's not what Australians heard.
And it's not, but I'm making the point that we're not making that promise. What we are doing, we can do, will do, is point to all the evidence that renewables are the cheapest form of energy. The faster and better we get that renewable energy rolled out, the cheaper bills will be.
Let's just stay with the bills for the moment, if I can. If those lower prices that we're seeing in the wholesale price of electricity do not get passed on to the consumers, despite all the efforts you say you're going to make, will the government extend energy bill relief for suffering people, households, businesses?
We look at those matters budget by budget. Now, what we are doing, though, is making sure that our regulatory system is fit for purpose. So the government has introduced Solar Sharer, for example, which requires 3 hours free power in the middle of the day because we have so much solar energy. We're rolling out cheaper home batteries. As we speak today, 138,000 households have put in cheaper home batteries. These are the sorts of things we can do. Practical action, 138,000, Sarah, since 1 July, an extraordinary figure. A lot of those people will go from having a bill to a rebate. Or at the very least, can reduce their bills by 90% if they put solar panels and batteries on at the same time. So these are practical reforms that we are implementing to help people.
Let me just come back to that bill question, because if we're in a situation in the new year when the prices of people's power bills are not coming down, there's going to be a clamouring call for more power, for more bill relief. Are you ruling it out?
Just as I indicated, we consider those matters budget by budget with all the evidence in front of us. Now, we've had one quarter where wholesale prices have tumbled by about a third. Now, one quarter doesn't mean the job's done. We have to keep going to ensure that the cheapest, most reliable, lowest emissions form of energy, renewables, is rolled out as quickly as we can. And that's what we're doing. Now, I know you haven't asked me about the opposition, but the fact of the matter is there's a choice. We have a policy suite which is putting downward pressure on prices. They've taken policy decisions which would increase prices. So that's a debate that will roll out between now and the next election, and a debate we're happy to have.
Are we in a position now where the success, really, of the Albanese government is dependent on you bringing down those energy bills? Not to put too fine a point on it, but that's the question.
Well, a government is doing many things all at once. I'm a member of a cabinet doing many, many things, including, yes, one of my key jobs is to make sure that Australians are paying the lowest bills they can. The way to do that, in my very strong view, is to keep on going with rolling out renewable energy, both at household and grid levels. We're doing that. We're making good progress. We have 5 gigawatts of new energy put on over the last year. That's actually a record. And the more supply you have, the better that is for prices.
Sure, but we've got energy bill relief running out very shortly in a month's time. Is it in your mind now that we could be in a situation in the new year when that's having to be extended, notwithstanding
All I can do is repeat
news
my
on
answer,
inflation.
that the government takes those decisions fiscal event by fiscal event. That's a fancy way of saying budget by budget.
Let me ask you a question about renewables. That's what you've been very keen to talk about. You make the case often, renewables, the cheapest form of energy in Australia. But the ever-increasing costs of building the transmission that needs to go with those renewables mean that power bills are going to remain elevated into the future. Is that just a fact that you need to be more clear about with the Australian public?
Well, the fact is, Sarah, a few points to make, if I could. We need more transmission lines, not just because of renewables. We need more transmission lines. The grid had not been really in any substantial way added to for 40 years. Someone had to fix it. So we've come along, and what we've said is this transmission needs to be built. Our policies enable it to be built as quickly and as cheaply as possible through our Rewiring the Nation fund. Transmission lines that are always going to need to be built. Again, even at the last election, the Liberal Party still would have needed to build new transmission lines to get their nuclear energy around.
But you know from AEMO that the forecasts are that the costs of building that transmission system is going up by 25 to 55%. I'm quoting them for overhead transmission, 10 to 35 for substation projects. So let me just ask the question to you again. Renewables is the cheapest form of energy. But is it right that the cost of the transmission is going to mean that our power bills remain elevated into the future?
Let me try the answer a different way, if I could, that might satisfy you more. The transmission needs to be built anyway, regardless of the type of energy that's being generated. Point one. Point two, even counting the cost of transmission, and yes, transmission costs money, and yes, like most infrastructure projects around the world, they're getting more expensive. No secret there. Even counting the cost of transmission and storage, renewables still comes out as the cheapest form of energy. So it's still the right call for the Australian economy and for bill payers to continue with renewables. The more we can do in households, by the way, of course, that's less need. The more batteries that go in, the more rooftops that put solar on. That's energy that doesn't need big transmission lines, but we will still need new transmission lines regardless. Doesn't matter who the minister is, who the government is, we're going to need transmission lines.
Is this giant, ambitious renewables projects going to make our bills smaller or not?
Well, because renewables are the cheapest form of energy, including transmission, the answer to that is yes.
There's a lot of stake here if you can't guarantee lower electricity prices in coming years. The narrative of a failed government will grow in the year ahead. How are you going to combat that?
By facts and by achievements, by continuing. The fact of the matter is the Liberal Party wants to sweat coal assets longer. I guess to the credit, they're honest about that. They want to keep coal-fired power running for longer. It's the most unreliable part of our energy system. When coal goes down, your bills go up, and coal goes down a lot. Unplanned outages, coal-fired power stations breaking down. We've got them today. We'll have them tomorrow. As the Australian Energy Regulator has pointed out, that is the biggest driver of price spikes, is coal-fired power stations breaking down. I want to replace them. The Liberal Party wants to keep them. That's the choice. Now, do I need to keep saying that and engaging in that debate? You bet. Am I up for that? Absolutely, because we've got the facts on our side.
So you've described the energy transition, including on our programme a number of times, as now, in fact, bigger in scale. You used to say as big as the Industrial Revolution. You revised that upwards to bigger than the Industrial Revolution.
In a faster time period.
Yes. How can a transformation on that scale allow you time to be the COP negotiator?
Oh, look, the COP, I think, firstly, I think it's a good thing that Australia holds the negotiation presidency. It's more controversial than you might have imagined. I would have thought, even if you don't agree with everything the government's doing, you could say, well, having an Australian chair the negotiations is a good thing for our country. Now, in terms of time, it is by design a role to be held by a serving cabinet minister. 8 out of the last 10 COP presidents have been ministers of their cabinet with jobs similar to mine. Some have been climate ministers, some have been environment ministers, some have been foreign affairs ministers, one's been a prime minister. But they've done their day job because it's not a full-time chief executive role, it is the chair of negotiations. That is a role which would require me to go to COP, which I'll go to anyway, require me to go to pre-COP, which I will go to anyway. It is not a full-time job. It is a lie by Susan Lee to say it's a full-time job. It's a good thing for Australia that we have more influence, not a bad thing.
Chris Bowen, we'll talk again when we tick into the new year. We'll see what happens with energy prices. But in the meantime, thank you very much indeed.
Have a great Christmas, Sarah.
You too. Thank you.